So here there's a relationship between time and emptiness. When a person complains about not having time, that lack of time is caused by the person themselves because if they want, they have time and can find it somewhere. So why is it that so many people don't have available time? Because if they allow time to be available, the void appears.
Sparks that I don't remember. Hold and let it shine. Fix and start to fade away. Fix and start to fade away. Fix and start to fade away.
Hello, dear friends of Kabbalah Podcast. We are once again with our dear friend MarioSaban.
How are you, Nacho? It's a pleasure for me. Very happy to be here.
Same here, Mario. I'm really happy too. Especially because we're diving into a topic that I won't beat around the bush with, the perception of time. And I'll throw in a question. Do we really lack time? Or do we just have too many distractions?
Well, there's something I find interesting before even getting to that question. It's when you said, I'm not going to waste time. And that leads to a bigger question. When do people feel like they're wasting or gaining time? When someone feels they're wasting time, it's because they're not doing what their soul truly desires. And when they feel they're gaining time, it's because they are doing what their soul longs for. So even before we talk about distractions, there's a key concept here. It's about who is fulfilling the purpose of their life. That person is always trying to gain time. And what does it mean to gain time? It means focusing your energy on fulfilling your soul's purpose. So when someone feels like they're losing time, it's actually a good sign. It means they're getting closer to understanding the true calling of their soul. When a person doesn't know the purpose of their soul, why they came into this world, they are always wasting time because they can never truly gain it. Now, when someone feels like they're temporarily wasting time but knows they gain it where the passion of their existence lies, imagine, for example, a doctor whose true calling is to heal. And suddenly they find themselves in a totally trivial conversation and they think, this person is making me waste time. I need to perform a surgery or do something more meaningful related to the passion of my life, the purpose of my existence. There are two ways of wasting time. One is wasting time permanently, that is not knowing the purpose of your life and therefore constantly wasting time because there's no way to gain it, since you lack that sense of direction. And then there are those, and I include myself, who do know the purpose of their lives. So we focus not on losing time, but on gaining it. For example, this interview for me is part of the purpose of my life. It's gaining time, not losing it. But if I'm in a conversation that adds nothing to the meaning of my life, I start to feel uncomfortable, like in a meeting I want to leave as soon as possible. The question is, why do we feel that way? It might seem like a lack of empathy. Everyone else is happy, enjoying themselves, and yet deep inside you're thinking, wow, I really want to leave. This isn't giving me anything. Why does that feeling come up? Your soul is reminding you that your time must be aligned with your true purpose. That situation isn't contributing to your personal growth or to the expansion of your level of consciousness. You find yourself in a meeting where people are just talking about someone else, and you ask yourself, what's the point of wasting time talking about another person? So in reality, you just want to leave that meeting, and that feeling, that urge to leave, doesn't come from a lack of empathy. It comes from a complete disconnection between those conversations and the purpose of your life. That's why many people say, I need to change the group of people I'm around, find those who share my interests so I can feel that I'm growing in consciousness and gaining time, not losing it. Many people confuse a lack of empathy with what is actually a deep awareness of wasting time from the perspective of the soul's purpose. When the soul feels that it's wasting time, it has to leave, of course in a respectful and polite way, but it has to walk away. Sometimes it even has to end certain friendships that belong to a period of life when one's level of consciousness was lower. Now that consciousness has expanded, those connections no longer resonate. So I'd say we must be careful not to build a spiritually non-empathetic persona just because we've outgrown trivial matters. That's one side of it. On the other hand, as time goes by, and yes, it's worth repeating, as life moves forward, one becomes more aware of the need to make the most of every moment, knowing that at some point we're all going to die. Time waits for no one, and when the soul senses it's being wasted, it must step away. So the idea of death as a limit to our time is, for me, a key concept. If we were immortal and had all the time in the world, we wouldn't experience the intensity of time. Death is what guarantees our perception of time and its intensity. Knowing that our time is limited and that we are going to die is actually a good thing. It helps us make the most of it. In eternity, I seriously doubt we'd use time wisely, because everything could always be left for tomorrow. Imagine this interview. Let's do it tomorrow. We're eternal anyway. That things are accomplished because of death, because we know that a moment will come to an end. We're pushed to act, to realize things. So death is still a safeguard for our sense of purpose. In the future, as human life expectancy increases, we'll have to see whether that intensity of time can still be maintained. It already seems like intensity is fading. People are starting to struggle with how to live with greater intensity. In any case, I'll say it again. For now, death is a safeguard for how we use our time. But truly, making the most of our time doesn't depend only on death. The most fundamental factor is knowing the purpose of our life. Because when we live with purpose, every moment becomes meaningful, and that's when we truly begin to value time.
I was preparing this talk and couldn't help but look into the different theories about time. From a philosophical point of view, there are two clearly defined branches known as Theory A and Theory B. Theory A is a dynamic theory that suggests becoming is real, that the present exists, the past existed, and the future will exist, although it does not exist yet. On the other hand, Theory B is a static theory, in which the past, present, and future all exist simultaneously, and the flow or passage of time is just an illusion. This latter theory aligns more closely with Einstein's theory of relativity, which interprets time as just another dimension. Understanding these perspectives helps us rethink how we experience time and our place within its flow. So, when you were talking about the connection between the feeling of whether we are wasting time or not, and knowing what your soul truly wants, I got the sense that, in a practical way, one way to stay connected to what the neshama came to do is to consider that perhaps time is an illusion, right? That is, we experience time, but from a metaphysical perspective, we are connected to what has happened, what is happening, and what will happen, all at the same time. In this way, the neshama speaks to us, in a sense, connects with us, and tells us what it is that we came here to do. Because in the end, it's not about how much time we have, but how aligned we are with the purpose our soul came to fulfill. Ultimately, it's about transcending time to live in true alignment with our soul's purpose. There are times when we experience reality as if time was something linear. But in truth, if we think of time as something already laid out, something we can connect with in all its dimensions, then we can also move closer to that deep desire of the neshama to manifest itself in life, in the material world.
From the perspective of Kabbalah, each dimension has a different perception of time. If we consider that there are 10 dimensions, then there are 10 different perceptions of time. But this also has to do, and I want to emphasize this again, with the level of refinement one has. In the end, a person is defined by what they do with their time. So the real question is, what are we doing with our time? Beyond the metaphysical or philosophical discussions, which belong more to the cosmogonic realm, I would focus more on the subjective aspect, the need for the individual to make the most of the time they have. Because if not, we fall into pure physics, but the human response, knowing that in the material world we will die, and that beyond the material world learning doesn't happen in the same way, is to recognize that true learning happens here in this life. And the first thing that emerges in that awareness is the dimension of Bina, which is the one that must organize chronological time, the time we have, in service of the fulfillment of the purpose of life. In other words, we're not talking about metaphysical variables for analysis here. Those are matters for physicists in the lab. On a cosmogonic level, we can discuss the reality of time, but when it comes to the individual's experience, what truly matters is how time is lived in daily life. And in everyday life, many people feel that they're constantly running out of time. So how can we begin to address this widespread sensation in contemporary society of not having enough time? What practical tools can we offer to help people make better use of the time they do have? My first suggestion is this: if we don't know the purpose of our life, it will be very difficult to discern what is essential from what is secondary in terms of the activities we engage in. From the perspective of Kabbalah, someone who knows their life's purpose holds a significant advantage. They already understand which activities are superficial, trivial, or distractions, and which are aligned with fulfilling their life's purpose. That's why the first step I would recommend is to truly work on discovering your life's purpose. A person who is constantly distracted usually doesn't know where they're heading. They go from one thing to the next, scattered. It's like being a one-man band, but instead of directing the music is dragging them along. That is, it's one thing to live as the conductor of your orchestra, and another to let the orchestra lead you anywhere, with the conductor unable to lead. The conductor must be in control. Therefore, someone who doesn't know the purpose of their life lives in multitasking mode, doing a bit of everything, but never truly focusing. They go here, they go there, with no direction, no defined focus. I'm not sure why you're laughing. Some people simply don't have their focus defined, but when you do, you're like a laser beam that can pierce through a wall because all your energy is concentrated on a single point. Otherwise, you're just filling your available time with smoke, with words, with superficial actions, but never truly achieving anything because you don't know where you're going. Someone who does know says, I'm not going to waste time, I want to focus on my purpose. And every time you refine your use of time, distractions show up. Why? Because those who haven't found their own purpose are often the ones who most tend to distract others. If I, for example, discover the purpose of my life, do you know who distracts me? Those who haven't found the purpose of their own lives. Because the only way they know how to deal with their inner void is to distract themselves and distract others. So, what is the challenge for someone who has found their life's purpose? To focus even more by cutting off distractions. Let me give you a concrete example so it doesn't sound just theoretical. The other day I got a WhatsApp message from someone saying, my last name might be from such and such a town, and I replied, look, I'm a teacher of Kabbalah. You need to speak with a genealogist who can tell you where your name comes from. Years ago, I used to have a very strong klipa of chesed. Maybe 10 years ago I would have responded eagerly, tried to help, gotten involved. But in truth, I don't know anything about that. I can't help him, and now I don't waste time. I clearly say it's not my area, and I cut the subject off at the root, because if I go into that interference, it's a waste for him, because he's asking someone who isn't a specialist, and it's a waste for me. We're both losing time. So what did I reply on WhatsApp? Sir, thank you for writing, but I'm not a specialist in that area. I'm a teacher of Kabbalah. At one point during my early research, I became interested in genealogy in Argentina, but that is not my field. It is not just about knowing your life path, but also about reminding others that they cannot interfere with it. In other words, if your life project is truly focused, no one should be able to steer you off course. And if someone does manage to do that, then maybe your project was not so strong to begin with. Maybe it was a weak one, easy to derail. I'm talking about the overall life project, not a specific one. You can have a clear life purpose and still carry out 15 different projects within that framework. There can be many projects, as long as they align with your core life purpose. Everything we are talking about here belongs to the realm of life order, of understanding, of time management. In fact, many people have been asking me to give a course on this topic, and it is very possible that at some point I will have to teach it at the Kabbalah school, how time is perceived from the perspective of Kabbalah. You have fulfilled your role of emptiness, now comes the filling role, and the role of filling has to have the chokma and nacho sometimes spend 6, 7 months, 8 in the filling process.
Exactly, it's the very concept we were discussing at the beginning of the talk. You were approaching it from the perspective of Bina, the organization of time. What could you share about the perception of time from the perspective of Chokma?
Chokma is connected to Netzach, which we could call creativity and the way to control that creativity. So there must be moments of creativity, moments of expansion, moments where Bina stops organizing in order to allow content to enter. We could say that Bina must leave space open for creativity, but that space of openness to creativity does not mean that this space has no time limit. That is, it's not that I'm in the expansive character of Chokma and I've lost all sense of time. Rather, I allow it a set time. Creativity needs freedom, but even freedom thrives when it is gently framed by purpose and direction. To somehow stop thinking about the organization of time, and that is, Chokhmah is a time that I dedicate to an intuitive, non-rational, non-conceptual self-reflection, where I allow myself to free from the tension that Bina keeps me in a certain way regarding that lack of time. But to have that Chokhmah, I need time. Bina has to give me time. So what does Bina do? Bina can do two things. First, either fill my schedule with activities or leave open spaces. Those open spaces have to be filled by Chokhmah, the wisdom. People are afraid of open spaces because they fear the void. So here there's a relationship between time and emptiness. When a person complains about not having time, that lack of time is caused by the person themselves because, if they want, they have time and can find it somewhere. So why is it that so many people don't have available time? Because if they allow time to be available, the void appears.
Of course.
In the void is where Chokhmah should appear, not the void itself. That is the moment you have available time at the service of the pure meaning of your life, without the action of matter, without material action. So, of course, Bina has to balance what we would call the action in matter, and Chokhmah, how much time should it give to each one? Of course, imagine, 10 years ago I had 8 or 9 hours to study all day, and then at the end of the day I taught my course, which supported me financially. So my Chokhmah was very developed because I gave it a lot of available time. Now defending available time for Chokhmah feels like an odyssey because I increasingly need to keep that time available. That's where the writing is, the creativity, the study. And Bina, on the other hand, says, well, but there also has to be dissemination. This podcast has to exist. Balancing time between creation and action is the true challenge. So of course Bina plays a double role. On one hand, it handles the matter side, administrative tasks. I have to go to the dentist, I have to be with the kids, I have to cook, I have to do the laundry, the administrative matters that Bina has to give time to. On the other hand, Bina has to give time to the empty space where the person shouldn't feel emptiness but should connect with Chokhmah. Of course, if Bina is afraid of empty time because it feels the void negatively, it's because Chokhmah isn't entering. So Bina will take everything to the action of matter.
Exactly.
So, of course, here's the thing. If it takes you entirely to the action of matter, there will come a time when you're just repeating, not growing, and not fulfilling your potential. You're only draining energy. So then comes Bina's reflection. Well, I don't have to do this work. What I have to do is give time to Chokhmah, create that empty space, and work with the void until I no longer feel that the void is a negative emptiness.
That's why I was asking you. The first reflection I was trying to share about Theory B for me has to do with the possibility of settling into the dimension of Chokhmah in relation to that perception of time, not so tightly bound to the material accomplishment that Binah provides. It's about embracing time beyond mere material success. True wisdom transcends time and material bounds.
Of course, but the problem is that to have that available time for Chokhmah, Bina has to give it. It has to give the time. So here you have the paradox. I need time for intuitive knowledge, for art, for development, for the revelation of whatever comes from above. That time has to be given to me by Bina. If Bina is afraid of the void and blocks it, then that information doesn't come to me, and I end up depending on Bina again. That's why Madirolas, the great Spanish Kabbalist, whom I care for deeply and send a big hug to, says that Bina is the interface located between Keter and Chokhmah in relation to the 7 lower dimensions.
Exactly. It's the interface, as you say. But I wanted to make this distinction because in the introduction, you talked about how losing time, or not losing time, whether there are too many distractions or not, has to do with whether your soul is doing what it came to do. Often what happens is that Bina obstructs that desire of the soul. That is, Bina occupies a huge space and isn't able to give that space to the Neshama, so that one can come to do what they came to do. Why? Because it can't withstand the information.
If I take myself as an example to share with you how I've somewhat mastered this whole topic, I think it would be good for people to know my own experience. What I do is divide the year into large periods of time so that one part has more strength over the other. For example, let's say it's 2025. I reserved March for interviews and sessions, interviews and everything related to administrative matters, the kind of things Bina handles. Okay. I had to suppress all that desire to study more and to write. Why? Because I scheduled that starting in April. So in April I enter another phase in which I've already fed all the administrative matters that come from Bina, because you have to feed each dimension. So during the month of March, I held Chokhmah back, telling her, relax, your moment is coming in April. But first let's take care of this so that Bina feels at ease, knowing that most of her commitments have been fulfilled. Then you move into a phase where the administrative side is set aside, or you do the bare minimum, and you increase the time for reflection, which is time for study, time for writing. When you increase that, the demands from Bina must already be settled. That is, you have to tell Bina, I already gave you March, we did what you needed to do, and now we need to do something else. Because if not, Bina will cause frustration.
Yes, it's true, the Bina has appetite.
The biggest problem is to cause frustration to the meaning of your life.
Yes.
That is, with all the activities I do in the material realm, I might be betraying my true activity. Because my true activity is study, research, and growth on the level of consciousness. But on the other hand, if I don't discharge, if I don't give outwardly, that increase in consciousness causes Chokhmah to get stuck, spinning in circles. Because what do we say in Kabbalah? If one doesn't empty oneself, one can't continue receiving. So what does Bina do in the material field? It plays a role in favor of Chokma because it's helping to empty. That is, in the sense that when you're in the material world and in administrative activities and in an interview, a session, a class, you're emptying yourself. But there comes a point of such emptiness that you need the beginning of a new period of filling up. Yes, empty to receive again. But that's the thing. Until you reach that point, the filling can't begin, because there has to be as complete an emptying as possible. Only after true emptiness can new energy fully flow in.
Give me 15 seconds, Mario, and continue explaining what you were saying, please.
Hey Mario, what are you doing waiting for me? We were supposed to meet at 9 o'clock.
But I've been here since 8:30, Nacho. We have to work.
Well, okay, you're right. We have to get to work. Follow us, join the conversation, and like our content. Discover more about MarioSaban and Kabbalah at MarioSaban.com. Let's continue growing and learning together. I love this podcast. Well, I won't ramble.
Let's get to work.
Mario, welcome again. Please, can you continue with what you were explaining about emptying?
Yes, the issue is the following. What I was trying to explain is the strategy of filling and emptying the kli.
Okay.
The Baina has the function of emptying the kli. But it empties by filling you with activities. But those activities with which it fills you is to empty you when you feel empty because you are filling up others. When you feel empty, then you have to put Gebura. You have to put the brakes, the Baina, and tell it very well. You have fulfilled your role of emptiness, now comes the filling role. And the role of filling has to have the Chokma and Nacho sometimes spend 6, 7 months, 8 in the filling process. Until I suddenly have a month of a lot of activity because the emptying process begins. For example, in my case, what would be the filling process? Studying, researching, writing. What is the emptying process? The classes, the interviews, the sessions, the writing of the book, all this empties me. And in general, mixing the processes doesn't work for me. There are people who can do it because of the nature of their soul. There are people who in the same day fill and empty themselves. In my case, I need periods of filling and periods of emptying, because until I reach a kind of total emptiness, where I've poured out a bit of my life in that emptying, I'm not at peace with allowing myself to be filled again. And then I say, okay, now it's a clean slate. I've released everything. What I had to unload as a revelation, and now I am going to go on to fill myself up again. But the mixture of times does not work for me. That is to say, I am a little bit like in the Ecclesiastes, time to sow, time to reap, time to sow, time to fill, and time to empty. When I am in the time of emptying, I have a lot of external activity. But when I'm in my filling time, I have very little external activity. What happens is, of course, we have our social media team constantly posting reels, so it seems like I'm always outward facing. But in reality, there's a lot of time when I'm completely inward. That's why people think I live on social media. But I don't live on the network. It just seems that way because I have a team organizing my content online. For example, I can spend 3 months studying without appearing on social media, but to the public it looks like I'm there all the time. So, of course, what people see from the outside is very different from how one actually manages their time. I could be deep in study and still hear people say, I see you so much on social media, and I think, how can that be if I've been studying for 3 months?
People think this guy is literally everywhere at the same time.
I have a great team that puts out good reels with consistent timing, so since I'm being carefully dosed across social media, it seems like I'm always online. But, dear listeners, let me tell you, what you're hearing right now will probably come out in 2 months while I'm deep in study. And you might think I'm here in the present, but I'm not.
In fact, you are sleeping now.
The truth is that when it comes out sometimes I don't know where I am. It could be that I am meditating on a mountain and it comes out on the reel. No, but people when it comes on the reel think I'm in the present. They don't know whether Sabán is in the present, in the past, or in the future. It's very strange. People think I'm all the time making videos and reels for the networks, but I'm not. I am studying. People will ask themselves, and this man, when did I study? What's really happening is that I have a good team behind me that makes me be on the networks all the time.
Well, Mario, we go on.
Thank you very much. We move on, and in the next chapter we will go deeper into what you told us.
Thanks, Nacho.
Thank you.